Hello gamers and welcome back. I'm Rob, of course, or Warshak if you want to call me by my in-game name. This is a video you guys have been asking for me for a while now. Basically since the release of Nobles and Catacombs, I definitely wanted to modify and refine these decks as best as possible before giving them to you guys, because I wanted to be able to give you the best top 5 decks I could that cost less than 2,500 dust. I've picked these decks exclusively because when toning back a deck and taking a lot of the cards out that are legendaries and epics, sometimes the deck just doesn't perform how it's supposed to anymore. And the decks that I've selected, they still do exactly what they're supposed to do. It's just not, to the highest capability they can do it, but the deck still does exactly what it's supposed to do. You can still get some really nice ranks with these decks, and it basically has the whole core of the deck still intact. This again is going to be one of our longer videos going over these decks, because while I talk about, I'm going to do a brief introduction of the deck, what the deck does, and kind of what to expect with it. After that, we're going to talk about within the deck cards that you over time, if you really like the deck, you're like, Rob, how can I improve this deck? I get that question a lot. We'll talk about a couple cards that you could strive to start adding to your collection once you really enjoy the deck and you start building up your dust to be able to craft some of those more expensive cards. So with that, we're going to be looking at the tempo / secret mage, looking at the kind of how the deck is laid out. It's like 1/3 minion, 2/3 spells. The spells are for draw, for value to kill other minions, and then the minions you have are combo based, so they're either going to allow you to play your secrets earlier than normal, they reduce the cost of your spells, we get increased attack for every spell you play, like the mana worm. So every minion in this deck has a specific purpose for which it's supposed to do. Again, when we're looking at these decks, I know I'm gonna get this question. Hey Rob, why'd you play this? Why don't you just do this? This other card is better. I know that card is better, but that card either came from maybe an expansion, maybe is an epic, it's a legendary. All of these decks don't include any expansion cards, any epics, or not any legendaries, and very little epics, very little epics. To get them under that 25k dust or 2.5k dust mark. So with that, Tempo Mage, very fast-paced deck. Normally the game is over prior to turn 10, 90% of the time. In the early game, you're really hoping to get your Cabal, Lackey, Mana Worm, Arcanologist out to either play a secret early on, draw a secret from your deck, or put some pressure on with the Mana Worm. From there, in your mid game, you're looking to play as many secrets as you can through, again, your Kirin Tor Mage, playing them naturally, drawing cards with Arcane Intellect. From there, you're going to either want to burn face with cards like Fireball, Frostbolt, Firelance Portal, depending on how much pressure you put in the early game, or you can use those cards to clear off the board, so cards like Faceless Summoner and Cabal Crystal Runner are able to attack your opponent in the mouth. It depends on your situation. Some games, go for more board control. Other games, it's basically you've lost the board. You just kind of have to go face and do the best you can on the board. It kind of all depends on the situation. So a couple cards that this deck is currently missing. It's actually not missing a lot at all. I kind of brought it up over here. We're missing a Lunith, which is the new Mage legendary weapon. At the end of each turn, you draw 3 cards, which is really good for this deck because most of the cards in this deck are fairly cheap. So you basically throw up as many cards as you can in one turn. A Lunith draws you 3 more, plus you draw at the beginning of your turn. So you're basically drawing 4 cards a turn, which is insane. No deck can keep up with that. So basically, if you a Lunith and you and your opponent are semi-equal, within 2 turns, they will have been dominant. You will dominate. They will be no more. So Lunith is one of the core cards in this deck that, again, we couldn't include because it's a legendary, but a card to strive for. 2 other cards is Corridor Creeper. I've replaced that with the Cabal Crystal Runner. Again, if I include Corridor Creeper, the price of the deck exponentially increases by 800 dust, putting it over 2,500. So keep that in mind. That's why we run the Faceless Summoner instead. And then from there, the Valet, obviously it's a 2 mana, and it's a 2 mana 2/3. If you control a secret, it does 3 damage to whatever you'd like. Very good card. Again, couldn't include it, so I replaced those with the Galaka Crawlers, which is a tech against pirates. At the lower rank, I can only assume pirates are as popular, if not more popular, than at the higher ranks. So double Galaka Crawler, I feel, is very, very good, given what this deck is weak to. This deck is weak to other aggro decks. This deck does very well against control, so if we can Galaka some pirates, your boy is happy. Very powerful deck for the cost, fairly easy to play. You're not doing any mental hula hoops with this deck while playing it, and yeah, pretty good. Moving on to Warlock, this is going to be more specifically the Zoo Warlock, a little bit cheaper than the Mage deck we just went over, just over 2,000 dust to build it. This deck resembles Zoo. Zoo's been Zoo for the entirety of what Warlock has been. The core of the deck is to play little resilient minions as fast as possible, swarm the board, be basically little Zerglings. If you've ever played StarCraft, high health totals, their attacks, you look at Dark Shard, counts them in a 3-mana 1/5. Every time you play a minion, gain +1 attack. Over 1 to 2 turns, the guy's exponentially huge for 3 mana. You can't beat it. You got Doomguard, 5 mana, 5/7, with charge. Huge guy there. Corridor Creeper, every time a minion dies on the board, it gets 1 less. It actually reduces the cost of what it costs to play it. So at the end, if you have a Corridor Creeper in your opening hand, by turn 3 or 4, most of the time you can play it for 1, 2, as little as 0 mana. Again, just swarming the board, resilient minions. Again, protecting the Galaka Crawlers. Pirates are very important. Rob, why is there no Prince in this deck? Prince is always played in Zoo. Well, guys, Prince is a legendary at 1,600 dust by itself. That's almost the entire cost of this deck. So we've decided to play Demon Fires, Galakas, and Homunculus instead of the Prince, obviously. But again, for those of you who are beginner players, budget decks, this is a great pick for you. Zoo decks have always been sort of kind of like the rudimentary, learn how to play Zoo, then you can learn how to play everything else, because there's very little spell interaction with this deck. You have 2 Soulfires and a Mortal Coil. That's the extent. Oh, actually I lied. You got Demon Fires and Blood Fury Potion, but their uses are very linear. You Blood Fury Potion on your guy, it gives a buff, and that's just what it does. With cards that are a little bit more complex down the road, when do I use this? Do I save it? Do I use it? Do I, against certain decks, it's used in different ways that you wouldn't normally think of. So just Zoo, very simple deck to play, great introductory, and it's a good deck to build upon because there's a lot of core cards in this deck that you can include. There's actually a list of cards off to the side. Holy shit, Rob, you did some more. Gul'dan is probably the #1 card that you'd want to add as soon as possible if you want to play this Zoo Warlock deck. And Gul'dan basically resummons all demons that have died this game, up to 7 of them, obviously, because you can only have 7 minions on your board. But a very, very powerful card. And it's one of the, if anybody's playing against Zoo and they're like, holy shit, please don't have Gul'dan on 10, it's one of the worst fears for anybody playing against this deck. And when they do, it's just very sad. So Gul'dan is probably #1. Besides that, maybe Mechazar's Imp, because it says, when you discard a card from your hand, redraw a card. But again, that came from the Karazhan expansion that's rotating out in roughly 3 months. Plus, it's pretty expensive, so it's not a necessity. You can definitely play without the Imp, but it's just also one of those good cards. You also have cards like Spellbreaker, Serenite Chain Gang, Dreadlord, Vicious Fledgling. All of those cards are also inclusions that if you can, tech them out. If you don't like Blood Fury Potions, you don't like Crystal Weavers, you can do what you like. But those are all notable cards that are also found in Zoo at the moment. Besides that, there's not really anything else I think that stands out to me about Zoo. It's pretty straightforward. Definitely one of the cheaper decks to build. And again, you can get rank 5 with this deck. If you add Gul'dan, you can start pushing, even higher than that. These guys, I specifically picked these decks out because naturally they are just not that expensive. These cards are only 3 to 5 cards off being what they would normally be that people play to go hit Legend with. So, and you'd be like, Rob, I can't even hit rank 10 with it. Maybe sometimes, guys, it's not exactly the deck that the problem is. Oh no, what happened to my, oh, here it is. Ooh, I thought I messed up my little transition there. All right, so the next deck we're going to look at is going to be the Jade Druid deck. Again, a very linear kind of deck to play. What do? You kind of just want to keep playing your green men, which are the Jades, and eventually it starts off with 1/1, 2/2, 3/3, and they just grow exponentially. And with cards like Jade Idol, you're able to basically go infinite with them because you shuffle it back in your deck. You make more Jade Idols, you shuffle it back into your deck. The most expensive card in this deck is Ultimate Infestation. You gotta have 2 of them. It's just one of those cards that's kind of just too good not to put in the deck. So for those of you who are unfamiliar with Jade or Druid, you ramp, and ramp means gain mana crystals faster than your opponent. So you play cards like the Wild Growth, which gives you a mana crystal. You play cards like Jade Blossom, which gives you mana crystals. And you play cards like Nourish, which give you mana crystals faster than your opponent. You hit 10, you Ultimate Infestation. The reason that you ramp and then Ultimate Infestation is because you're using cards in your hand to ramp, which means, again, gain more mana crystals. You're not actually playing very many minions in the early game, and if you are, they're very weak because your Jades aren't big yet because you've only played 1 or 2 or 3 Jade cards, which means max are 3, 3, 4, 4. And then Ultimate Infestation refills your hand with the value you lost because you ramped in the early game. So, you know, while you're at 10 mana, your opponent's still at 5 or 6 mana. You're sitting here playing 10 mana cards, and then after that, all of a sudden, you're playing 2 to 3 Jade cards per turn. They're getting exponentially big, and your opponent eventually can just not, they just can't deal with the amount of Jade you have. A couple key noted cards in this deck that aren't currently in here, but they're very, very powerful to put in here is Aya Blackpaw. She's one of the core Jade cards to have. Again, she's a legendary, so I couldn't really put her in here, but she's a great Jade card. Another one is going to be the Malfurion. Fantastic card, whether offensively or defensively. And then the other one's going to be Fandral. Out of the, if you could have picked, you can be like, Rob, I've got one, I can make one legendary. Do I make Aya, Malfurion, or Fandral? I would probably go with either the Aya Blackpaw or Malfurion first, then Fandral. As cool as Fandral is, he's not an absolute staple in the deck. Aya is just too good. She's amazing. And then a Malfurion, it's just really good too. It's a hard pick between them. You know, it's a really hard pick. I'd probably go Malfurion myself, but Aya is still a very solid option as well. And those are kind of the only cards missing in this deck. 3 cards missing. All of them are legendaries, but the deck, again, the core of it is still there. Make Jades, make them fast, refill your hand, make more Jades. Never really fatigue because of Jade Idol. Moving to Shaman, we have the Evolved Shaman. Again, a very, very cheap deck to play. Very powerful if played correctly and you have some good RNG on your side. 2,400 dust. So this is probably one of our more expensive, just shy of 2,500. The core of this deck is very similar to Zoo, but not quite there. You want to start off with playing cards like Firefly, Jade Claws, Flame Tongue Totem, Mana Tide. During the middle of the game, you're either using Jade Lighten to nullify your opponent's board. You're using Jade Spirit if your opponent doesn't have a board. You got Spellbreakers in there for the Dank Silence. From there, your win condition with this deck is basically using Doppelgangster and then Evolve. Rob, there's no Stonehill Defender in this deck. I couldn't fit it in here. If you want to play Stonehill instead of the Spellbreaker, Stonehill I believe is a rare and it puts the deck over 2,500. Again, specifically, I've built these in such a way that they're below 2,500 and they're the best they can be. Yes, so win condition, Doppelgangster, Evolve, gives you a board filled with, you know, at least 3 minions that are relatively pretty strong, roughly 4 plus attack each, and then you drop your Bloodlust after that. Sometimes you can kind of cheese your opponent out with a Primal Fin Totem, which isn't in this deck, but one of the cards that if I could put it in there, it would be. Instead of the Nobold Hermit, you'd play Primal Fin. Again, Primal Fin is a rare. Couldn't fit it in here because we'd be 25 over the 2,500 mark, but Primal Fin Totem is another really good inclusion instead of the Hermit once you get there. But again, you can go like Firefly into Hero Power into Firefly again, and then from there like Flame Tongue Totem into Bloodlust. And if your opponent just has like a slower draw, you can just cheese your opponent out very early on with Bloodlust. Or you have again the swarming win condition of your Doppelgangster Evolve. You also can even go Corridor Creepers or Thing from Belows into Evolve. That is very powerful as well. There's a lot of burst potential in this deck, and there's a lot of value in there too, because you have cards like Mana Tide, and if your opponent doesn't deal with Mana Tide Totem, you're going to outvalue them regardless of, you know, the power level. Just because you have a lot of lower end cards in your deck, if you're just drawing more than your opponent, it's just really hard for decks to deal with that. A couple notable cards that are missing in this deck is Thrall, the DK. Definitely a good one you'd want to put in here. It evolves all cards. It's basically having like a third evolve, but it doubles it because it evolves them twice instead of just once. Very powerful card. Costs 5 mana, but still very good. You have Galaka Crawler. A lot of people teching Galaka Crawlers. Again, it was a rare, couldn't really fit it in here. And then the Pirate Package, again, with patches. That's also something for the Zoo deck that I forgot to mention. Was the Pirate Package. Again, we couldn't get South Sea Captains and patches because 2 of them are epics, 1 of them's a legendary. I mean, that's like literally one of these decks. 3 cards is one of these decks in total. So, I mean, we just can't even think about the Pirate Package right now. This will do you just fine. It's best to just, if you can't afford the Pirate Package, run 2 Galaka Crawlers and you'll fuck everybody up who is playing the Pirate Package. For 2 rares, it'll do you the same thing as having a legendary and 2 epics most of the time. And it only costs you 2 rares and it counters them every time. The problem is when you don't play people with patches or pirates in their deck, and then you have the Galaka Crawlers, then you wish you had the pirates because the pirates are a little bit more aggressive than Galaka Crawlers, but to each his own. From there, I've explained the deck, the changes that we would make. Again, this is probably, I don't want to say it's one of the harder ones, but this is the one where it's like, do I devolve this board? Do I not devolve? Do I go all in? Do I bloodlust yet? Do I doppelgangster evolve? Can I use evolve on other things in doppelgangster? So this is a little bit more difficult because there is a little bit more spells to play in this deck, and each one is so powerful. You definitely want to play it at the right time. Again, if you're freshly baked right into the Hearthstone scene, I would really recommend Zoo. That's probably one of the, now I don't want to say easiest, but it's like you get a lot of the foundation mechanics of Hearthstone understood through playing Zoo. When to trade, when to go face, very limited spells, very hard to mess up a lot of turns. I mean, you still can mess up if you're very new and you're not sure what you're doing, but you know, it's a little bit easier. Moving to our last deck that we're going to cover, it's going to be the Face Hunter. It's a very, very aggressive. Faster than is probably the fastest deck we have, faster than Tempo Mage, faster than the Shaman deck. This is just full out aggression. Bada bing, bada boom, throw up on the board, buff them as fast as possible, face, 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 do as much damage as possible. Nothing else matters. Unless the trade on the board is like you're trading your 1/1 into his 10/1. You know what I mean? You're killing a 10 attack creature with your 1/1. Stuff like that. You just normally go face. All of the creatures in the deck, again, lots of 1-drops, lots of 2-drops, solid amount of 3-drops. So you're always going to have a 1, 2, and a 3. You want that every time. If if maybe sometimes you could avoid the 1-drop because you have coins, so you coin into 2, play a 2, then a 3, then a 4. It's just very Hearthstone-esque. You need to play shit every turn. Like if you're playing this deck and your first card is on turn 3, there's already an issue. This deck needs to 1, 2, 3 every, like you just need to curve them out. Curve them out, boys. That's basically the deck. There's not really anything crazy. Any notable cards that we're missing here? We're missing Leroy Jenkins. Again, that card's a legendary, so not really. You'd replace Wolf Riders with the Leroy or the Unleash the Hounds. We have Hat Trick, which is a card that comes from an adventure mode, which is a secret. So we've played the Explosive Trap and the Wandering Monsters instead of that. And then from there, we have, again, the Pirate Package. Normally, this deck runs Patches, South Sea Deckhand, and South Sea Captain. I think it's South Sea Captain. Yeah, there's 5 pirates, and currently, again, those are very expensive. So what do? We run this instead. You could also, with this deck, take out the Bear Sharks if you wanted to, and add in 2 Galaka Crawlers. It makes your turn 2 a little bit stronger. You also could take out Explosive Trap if you want to, and replace those with Galaka Crawlers. Those are all viable options as well. But for the main thing in this deck is just to push as much damage face as possible. This deck destroys destroys Warlock, destroys slower warriors, destroys Priest if they're slow enough. You know what I'm saying? By turn 4 or 5, you've just done so much damage and have 3 to 4 cards on board. It's just destruction. The only reason I don't recommend getting rid of Bear Shark right now is how popular Priest and Mage is, and they have a really impossible time dealing with Bear Shark because most of their deck is revolving around spells. Bear Shark can't be targeted by spells. It's a cheap minion that you can play on turn 2 if you coin them out, and it's just really resilient. Also, a short little combo with this deck that does a lot of damage is Corridor Creepers in your hand, right? So you have 1 to 2 Corridor Creepers in your hand. Let's say they cost 1 to 2 mana. Or even 0, you can play Tundra Rhino, and then you play Corridor Creepers for free, and then you can charge in for 12 damage from hand for 5 mana if you happen to have the Tundra Rhino double Corridor, or even just 7 damage from hand if you only have 1 Corridor Creeper and a Tundra Rhino. So it's just kind of like a little burst that people don't think about. Most people think about kill commands and hero powers, and maybe like a Huffer from an animal companion, but people don't think about the Tundra Rhino Corridor Creeper. Yeah! All right. So with that, that's going to wrap up the 5 budget-based decks that you guys can build. If you have any questions, comments, and concerns about these decks, or other people are just tuning in and, hey, you could play this instead, or Rob missed out on this, because again, I can't cover everything I want to, because I kind of want to make these as fast as possible, but also, include as much information as I can in a solid amount of time. So with that, thank you for watching. Appreciate it. Hopefully you guys enjoy this deck, or these decks, for you budget players out there, and I will see you out in ladder. So with that, thanks for watching, and I'll catch you in the next video. Of course, I'm Robert Warshak, and happy whatever the hell day it is.